I had always considered the mansion an inseparable part of my life. Its tall, majestic walls, adorned with ivy that had climbed and curled over decades, seemed almost alive, watching, waiting, remembering. The grand staircase, with its polished mahogany banister, had borne the weight of generations, echoing faintly with the footsteps of the past. The sprawling garden, with its wild roses, trimmed hedges, and stone fountains, had been my refuge, my sanctuary, and sometimes my confessor. This house was not merely a building. It was a living chronicle of my life, a witness to joys, sorrows, and the quiet moments that had shaped me. Every corner held memories, every room echoed laughter, whispered secrets, and occasional tears. So when my son Adifir called me one late afternoon, his voice unnervingly calm and collected, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. It was a calmness I knew too well, the kind one uses when delivering news that might shatter someone's world. "Mom, we're selling the mansion," he said casually, almost as if he were discussing a car or a small piece of furniture. The words struck me like a physical blow. I froze mid-step, my hand clutching the edge of the dining table, feeling as though the floor beneath me had vanished. "What? Selling the mansion? Why would you even think about that?" My voice trembled, betraying the storm I was struggling to contain. Adifir hesitated for a moment, as if carefully weighing his words. "Mom, you've been talking about downsizing for years. And we thought it's time. The maintenance is expensive, and well, it's just too big now." I struggled to breathe, a heavy lump forming in my throat. The idea that the house I had spent a lifetime in, every hallway, every window, every nook and cranny, might belong to strangers was unbearable. I could almost imagine unfamiliar feet pressing into rooms that had known only our family, our laughter, our quiet whispers at night. "Adifir, did you even discuss this with me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I knew I was failing. He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry both guilt and determination. "We wanted to surprise you. Don't worry, Mom. It's still your home until the papers are signed. We'll make it look seamless. You won't even notice anything changing." Seamless. The word felt like a dagger wrapped in silk. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run away and hide in the safety of the garden I had nurtured for decades. Instead, I felt a quiet storm building within me, a storm of fear, anger, and a desperate need to reclaim control over the one thing I thought was untouchable. If they believed I would allow this house to pass into unfamiliar hands without uncovering the truth that it held, they were gravely mistaken. Because this mansion, for all its grandeur and memories, held more than walls and furniture. It held secrets, secrets that I had carefully protected, never shared with anyone, not even Adifir. The very thought that these secrets might vanish forever if the house was sold sent a shiver down my spine. That night, sleep eluded me. I wandered through the mansion in a haze of disbelief, letting my hands brush along familiar surfaces. The polished wood of the staircase balustrade, the cold marble of the fireplace mantel, the faded velvet curtains. All of it carried echoes of my past. Each room seemed to speak to me, urging me to remember, to act before it was too late. In the library, I paused by the old oak bookshelf, my fingers tracing the spines of countless volumes that had been part of my family for generations. I remembered the secret compartment I had discovered as a young girl, hidden behind a row of forgotten encyclopedias. Years later, I had added my own treasures there. Letters from a time long past, journals chronicling moments of joy and despair, and small objects imbued with memories too precious to share. In my bedroom, I knelt beside the loose floorboard I had always known to be unstable. Carefully, I lifted it, revealing a collection of delicate items I had hidden over the years. Keepsakes, trinkets, and letters written in a hand that had grown with me. I had promised myself that some things would remain private, passed down only when the time was right. And now, the thought of them being sold to strangers, locked away or discarded, filled me with a cold, burning dread. I spent hours walking through the mansion, room by room, taking note of unusual gaps, hidden locks, and compartments I had long forgotten. There were places in the walls, behind cupboards, beneath floorboards, and even inside the old grandfather clock that seemed almost to whisper secrets to me. Something deep inside told me there was more to the mansion than even I had realized, something important enough that selling it without discovering it could be catastrophic. As I moved through the house, memories surged around me, each one sharper, more vivid than I remembered. I could see Adifir as a small boy, running through the hallways in search of imaginary monsters, his laughter ringing like bells in the cavernous space. I remembered our family gatherings, The smell of food from the kitchen mixing with the scent of roses from the garden, and the quiet evenings on the veranda, watching the sun dip behind the distant hills. The mansion had been a constant companion, a silent witness to the unfolding of our lives, and now it seemed poised to vanish from my grasp. The night stretched on, heavy with anticipation. I returned to the library and sat on the worn rug, sifting through letters and journals, tracing the familiar handwriting that had chronicled years of secrets. Each page, each envelope, carried whispers of the past, hints of stories that had never been told, messages meant for someone who understood the weight of memory. I realized then that this house was not merely brick and mortar. It was a living archive, a repository of experiences and truths that had shaped who I was. And now, in the quiet darkness, I resolved that I would not allow it to be sold until I understood every secret it contained. There was more to discover, and I would find it, no matter how long it took. I would uncover what the mansion had been keeping for decades, because once it was gone, so too might be the legacy it held. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I knew my mission had begun. I would explore every hidden corner, pry into every forgotten lock, and unlock the mysteries that had quietly shaped my life. Adifir's announcement had awakened something within me, a determination, a fierce need to protect the memories, the secrets, and the essence of the mansion itself. The house was more than a home. It was a living testament to generations, a silent guardian of the past. And I would not let it slip away without uncovering the truths it had long kept hidden. The mansion's library had always been my sanctuary. Long before the rest of the house stirred awake, I would retreat there with a cup of tea, letting the stillness settle around me like a protective cloak. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, their dark wood polished smooth by decades of careful care. Some of the books were so old that their leather spines had faded into cracked, unreadable patterns, while others bore gold-embossed titles that caught the morning light. The scent of aged paper, dust, and faint polish lingered in the air, comforting and familiar. That morning, however, the library felt different, charged, as if it were holding its breath. My thoughts were still tangled in Adifir's announcement, my resolve from the night before hardening into determination. If the mansion held secrets, I would find them here. This room had always seemed more than it appeared, as though it quietly observed rather than merely existed. I ran my fingers along the shelves, pulling out books at random. Some I recognized instantly, volumes I had read countless times, while others felt oddly unfamiliar, as though they belonged to a life I had never fully known. As I slid a thick, leather-bound novel back into place, something fluttered to the floor at my feet. I froze. A small envelope lay there, pale with age, its edges yellowed and fragile. My heart skipped a beat. I was certain it hadn't been there before, or if it had waited patiently for the precise moment when I was ready to see it. Slowly, almost reverently, I picked it up. It was addressed to me. Not to my parents. Not to the family name. To me, written in careful, elegant handwriting I did not recognize. My name looked unfamiliar in someone else's script, as if it belonged to a stranger's life rather than my own. A strange mix of curiosity and unease settled in my chest. The envelope felt delicate, as though time itself had worn it thin, yet it had survived decades untouched. I sat down in the armchair by the window, my hands trembling slightly as I opened it. Inside was a single letter, folded neatly despite its age. The paper crackled softly as I unfolded it, revealing flowing cursive written in deep blue ink that had faded but not disappeared. The date at the top made my breath catch. It had been written more than 50 years ago. The letter spoke cautiously, almost cryptically. It addressed me as if the writer had known me long before I could remember myself. It mentioned the mansion not merely as a home, but as a keeper of truths, truths deliberately hidden, locked away to protect both the family and its legacy. There was mention of a hidden room, concealed deep within the house, sealed off and forgotten by generations. The writer warned that the room held more than material wealth. It contained documents, records, and personal effects that could alter everything we believed about our family's past. The tone was urgent, almost pleading, as though the writer feared the knowledge might vanish if not discovered by the right person at the right time. My pulse raced as I finished reading. Could it truly be possible that the mansion held secrets even I was unaware of? I had lived here my entire life. I knew its rhythms, its creaks at night, its moods during storms. And yet, this letter suggested I had only scratched the surface. It felt as though someone from the past had reached across time to speak to me alone, trusting me with a truth no one else could be given. I reread the letter several times, committing every word to memory. There were no direct instructions, only hints, references to unseen thresholds, forgotten passages, and the place where silence was built to endure. The ambiguity frustrated me, but it also fueled my determination. I spent the rest of the morning searching. Carefully, methodically, I examined the library walls, tapping lightly for hollow sounds, pressing against panels, running my hands along seams that might conceal a latch. When I found nothing there, I moved on to other rooms. The house responded to my search with stubborn silence. Hours passed as I inspected floorboards, checked behind furniture, and explored spaces I hadn't thought about in years. Dust clung to my clothes, and my knees ached from kneeling and standing, but I refused to stop. It was in the attic, beneath a pile of old, moth-eaten carpets, that I finally found something. A glint of metal caught my eye. I pulled the carpets aside, uncovering a small metal key tied with a faded ribbon. The ribbon crumbled slightly at my touch, but the key itself was surprisingly well preserved, its surface cool and heavy in my palm. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart pounding. This was no ordinary key. It had been hidden deliberately, waiting. I tried it in every lock I could find, old cabinets, forgotten trunks, even doors I rarely used. Each time it failed to fit, and doubt crept in. But then, near the study, I noticed a narrow wall panel I had never paid attention to before. It blended perfectly with the surrounding wood, so subtle it seemed designed to escape notice. With a deep breath, I inserted the key. It turned smoothly. The panel creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A rush of cold air rose from below, carrying the scent of dust and something older, something sealed away for far too long. My hands shook as I turned on a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the shadows. Each step downward felt momentous, as though I were crossing a boundary not meant to be disturbed. At the bottom, the hidden room opened before me. Old furniture stood neatly arranged, covered in sheets. Trunks and boxes lined the walls, each labeled carefully in a language I did not immediately recognize. I moved slowly, taking it all in. There were documents, land records, wills, correspondence, some bearing names I recognized, others entirely foreign. Letters hinted at disagreements, hidden agreements, and choices that had shaped our family's fate in ways I had never imagined. In the center of the room stood a chest, solid and unyielding, locked with a combination rather than a key. I knew instinctively that whatever it contained was important, perhaps the most important truth of all. As I stood there, the weight of realization settled over me. Selling the mansion now would mean erasing this hidden history forever. My son and daughter-in-law, despite their good intentions, had no idea what they were about to lose. Not just a house, but a legacy buried in silence. I knew I had to act, and I had to be careful. If they suspected I had discovered something, they might rush the sale, sealing these secrets away for good. I would uncover the truth quietly, patiently, before anyone could take away the mansion, or worse, the answers hidden within its walls. The house had spoken at last, and I was listening. Over the next few days, the hidden room became my entire world. I barely noticed the passage of time as I descended the narrow staircase again and again, each step pulling me further away from the present and deeper into the past. Meals went untouched, and sleep came only in fragments. The mansion above continued its daily rhythm, but below it, in that sealed chamber, history waited patiently for me to listen. The room was colder than the rest of the house, as though it had been intentionally separated from time itself. I began organizing the contents carefully, spreading documents across the long wooden table I had cleared. Letters were stacked by date, photographs grouped by faces I slowly began to recognize, and journals laid out in chronological order. Every item felt deliberate, placed with purpose rather than abandonment. The documents were a puzzle, fragments of lives stitched together through ink and paper. Some letters were addressed to people whose names meant nothing to me, yet the signatures at the bottom stopped me short every time. They were unmistakable, family names, written in confident strokes, tied directly to my ancestors. These weren't rumors or legends passed down through vague stories. These were facts preserved in ink. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The mansion, I learned, had not always belonged to the branch of the family I knew. Decades ago, it had been owned by a distant line, one that history claimed had faded away, leaving no heirs, no records, no trace. And yet, here they were, speaking to me through these documents, insisting they had never vanished at all. They had hidden themselves. Letters described deliberate separations, strategic silences, and decisions made under pressure. Some born of fear, others of love. One letter spoke of disagreements, so severe they threatened to fracture the family forever. Another hinted at promises broken and repaired in secret. It became clear that the mansion itself had been chosen as the guardian of these truths, entrusted with preserving what could not safely be revealed at the time. Among the stacks of papers, one object drew my attention repeatedly. A small, cloth-bound diary, its cover faded but intact. When I opened it, I realized it belonged to a woman who had lived in the mansion during the 1940s. Her handwriting was elegant yet urgent, as though she had written knowing her words might someday be her only voice. She wrote of quiet evenings spent in the very rooms I knew so well, though her descriptions felt heavier, tinged with secrecy. She described a forbidden romance, one that crossed boundaries her family refused to accept. Their meetings were hidden, their promises whispered, their future uncertain. As I read, I felt an ache of familiarity, recognizing the weight of choices made in silence. The diary spoke of inheritances that could not be acknowledged publicly, assets that had to be concealed to protect those they were meant for. She described hidden valuables, not merely gold or money, but documents proving rightful ownership, sealed away until the right descendant could be trusted to uncover them. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. Some of the documents referenced properties that were never claimed, accounts that were never closed, and assets that were deliberately obscured. It became clear that what lay hidden here was not just sentimental history. It was a fortune, carefully preserved, waiting. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. The mansion was not simply a home. It was a vault, a time capsule, a silent witness entrusted with protecting a legacy until the family was ready to face it. And now, unknowingly, my own son and daughter-in-law were preparing to sell it, handing over not just walls and land, but generations of truth to strangers who would never understand its significance. The realization tightened something in my chest. They didn't know, and how could they? I had lived here my entire life without knowing either. The mansion had kept its secrets well. But now that I knew, I couldn't ignore them. I considered keeping everything to myself, at least until I fully understood the scope of what I had uncovered. Yet the thought of hiding it from Adithier felt wrong. This was his legacy too. And if I waited too long, suspicion might grow, and the sale might be rushed. I decided I would tell him, but gently. I wouldn't overwhelm him with documents or theories. I would let the house speak for itself, the way it had spoken to me. If he saw the hidden room with his own eyes, felt the weight of history beneath his feet, he would understand why the mansion could not simply be sold and forgotten. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the windows with gold, I found Adithier in the living room, scrolling distractedly on his phone. I suggested, casually, that we spend some time together in the library, reminiscing over old books and family stories. He agreed without suspicion, unaware of what awaited him. In the library, I moved deliberately, my heart pounding as I retrieved the small metal key from my pocket. Adithier noticed it immediately. "Mom, what's that?" he asked, his voice lowering instinctively. Instead of answering, I walked to the shelf and pressed against the hidden panel. It shifted with a soft creak. Adithier stepped back, his eyes widening as the narrow opening revealed itself. "Mom," he whispered, "what is this?" I turned to him, meeting his gaze steadily. There was no fear in his expression, only wonder and confusion. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. "Something," I said gently. "I think you should see for yourself." I switched on the flashlight and gestured toward the staircase. For a moment he hesitated, then nodded and followed me down into the shadows, unaware that with every step, he was descending into the hidden truth of our family's past. The mansion had waited decades for this moment, and at last, it was ready to reveal itself. Together, we descended into the hidden room, the narrow staircase creaking softly beneath our steps. The beam of the flashlight moved slowly across the walls, revealing shadows that seemed to retreat reluctantly, as though the space itself was unaccustomed to being seen. I could sense Adithier's hesitation behind me, his footsteps careful, his breathing uneven. When we reached the bottom, I stepped aside and allowed the light to fall fully across the room. Adithier stopped short. His expression shifted visibly, from curiosity to disbelief, and then to something deeper, almost reverent. The neatly stacked boxes, the covered furniture, the rows of documents laid out across the table, and the solitary locked chest at the center of the room all seemed to speak at once. "I had no idea," he murmured, his voice barely audible, as if raising it might disturb whatever fragile balance existed there. I watched him closely. This was the moment I had both anticipated and feared. For years, he had seen the mansion as a responsibility, an aging structure that demanded time, money, and constant attention. Now he was seeing it for what it truly was, a living archive quietly guarding generations of truth. I began to explain, slowly and carefully. I told him about the letter that had fallen from the book, about the key hidden in the attic, and about the woman's diary that had first revealed the deeper layers of our family's past. I spoke of the forgotten branch of our lineage, the deliberate silences, and the careful preservation of secrets that could not be revealed until the right moment. Adifier listened without interrupting, his gaze moving from box to box, document to document. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. "All this time," he said quietly, "I thought this place was just old. Heavy. Something we needed to let go of." "It's more than walls and gardens," I replied. "It's our story." We began opening the boxes together. Inside were bundles of letters tied with ribbon, photographs wrapped carefully in cloth, and folders filled with official documents. Some papers bore seals and signatures, others were handwritten and deeply personal. Adifier picked up a photograph and stared at it for a long moment. A group of unfamiliar faces standing on the mansion's veranda, dressed in clothes from another era. "They look like us," he said softly. "They are us," I answered. As we read through the documents, a clearer picture emerged. The mansion itself had been acquired through extraordinary sacrifices. One letter described how an ancestor had sold everything he owned to secure the property, not for status or wealth, but to protect something far more fragile: family unity and inheritance rights threatened by external forces. Another document revealed legal battles quietly fought and won, ensuring that the mansion would remain within the family, even if the truth behind those battles had to remain hidden. There were no dramatic tales of stolen gold or buried jewels. Instead, the true fortune lay in land rights, ownership documents, and correspondence that proved legitimacy where history had tried to erase it. There were letters written in times of uncertainty, pledging loyalty, protection, and silence for the sake of future generations. Adifier's admiration grew with each discovery. I could see it in the way he handled the papers now, with care, with respect. The mansion was no longer a burden in his eyes. It was a responsibility. "I almost sold all of this," he said, shaking his head slowly, "without ever knowing." "That's why the house waited," I replied. "It needed someone to listen." His gaze drifted toward the locked chest at the center of the room. It sat apart from everything else, solid and unyielding, as though guarding something final. We approached it together. The lock was old but sturdy, marked with faint symbols worn smooth by time. Using clues scattered throughout the documents, dates, initials, and repeated references, we worked carefully, testing combinations until, with a soft metallic click, the lock released. Adifier exhaled sharply as we lifted the lid. Inside were letters bundled in silk, pieces of delicate jewelry wrapped in velvet, and small heirlooms. A brooch, a signet ring, a pocket watch engraved with a name I recognized from the diary. None of it was ostentatious. Each piece felt personal, chosen not for its monetary value, but for its meaning. We examined the letters first. They spoke of love endured in silence, of children protected from the consequences of choices made by others, and of hope placed firmly in the future. The jewelry had belonged to women who had lived and loved within these walls, their stories never spoken aloud but preserved nonetheless. Together, these items formed a narrative no one outside the family could have imagined, a story of resilience, sacrifice, and trust. Adifier closed the chest gently. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of what we had uncovered settled between us, not heavy, but grounding. "I understand now," he said finally. "Selling the mansion wouldn't just have been a mistake. It would have erased everything they worked to protect." I felt a quiet sense of relief wash over me. This was not a battle I wanted to fight alone. "We don't have to decide everything at once," I said. "But the mansion stays, at least until we've honored what's here." He nodded, his expression resolute. "It stays." As we ascended the staircase together, leaving the hidden room once more in its careful silence, I felt something shift, not just between us, but within the house itself. The mansion had done what it was meant to do. It had revealed the truth to those ready to carry it forward. And for the first time since Adifier's phone call, I no longer felt afraid of the future. The past had finally been heard. After days of uncovering secrets, Adifir and I found ourselves sitting quietly in the hidden room, surrounded by the tangible remnants of generations past. The air felt different now, not heavy with secrecy, but calm, as though the room had finally exhaled after holding its breath for decades. Papers lay neatly stacked, boxes carefully arranged, and the once ominous locked chest now stood open, its contents respectfully returned and preserved. Adifir leaned back against the old wooden table, his expression thoughtful, almost solemn. He looked around once more before turning to me. "Mom," he said slowly, as if choosing each word with care. "I understand now. This isn't just a mansion. It's our family's history." I nodded, feeling a quiet swell of emotion rise in my chest. "Exactly," I replied. "Selling it now would be like erasing everything we've just discovered. All their sacrifices, their choices, their voices, it would all disappear." For a long moment, we sat in silence, listening to the faint hum of the house above us. That silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, filled with understanding, with respect, and with a shared sense of responsibility. The decision came naturally after that. There was no formal declaration, no dramatic agreement. We simply knew. The sale would be postponed, indefinitely. The mansion would remain in the family, not out of sentimentality alone, but out of duty. Over the following days, we worked together with care and intention. We cataloged every document, carefully photographing letters, journals, and legal papers. Adifir brought in archival folders and protective sleeves, insisting we preserve everything properly. Each photograph was labeled, each artifact recorded. What had once been hidden away in silence was now treated with reverence. The hidden room transformed before my eyes. It was no longer just a secret chamber. It became an archive, a protected space dedicated to safeguarding the family's legacy. We ensured the entrance remained concealed, known only to us, its purpose unchanged, protection, not exposure. The mansion itself seemed to respond to our efforts. Walking through its corridors no longer felt heavy. Instead, there was a sense of quiet pride, as though the house approved of what we were doing. Rooms that once felt too large and empty now felt purposeful again. When my daughter-in-law finally visited, she immediately sensed the change. She paused in the hallway, glancing around with curiosity. "Something feels different," she remarked. "You both seem invested." Adifir smiled and led her to the library. He explained everything gently, how the hidden room had been discovered, what we had found, and why selling the mansion was no longer an option. I watched her expression shift from surprise to fascination, and finally, to understanding. "This isn't just property," she said softly after he finished. "It's a responsibility." Her words brought me immense relief. What had begun as a casual plan, an attempt to simplify life, had turned into a shared mission to protect something irreplaceable. There was no resistance, no resentment, only respect for what the mansion represented. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to a gentler rhythm. I found myself walking through the mansion each morning, touching the walls, the shelves, the familiar furniture. Every surface seemed richer now, layered with meaning. The library remained my sanctuary, but now it felt alive in a new way, no longer hiding its purpose, but embracing it. The hidden room remained untouched by outsiders. No one else needed to know. It was not meant for display or recognition. It existed solely for the family, a quiet guardian of truths that had waited patiently to be found. One afternoon, I stood on the veranda, watching the sun dip low over the garden, just as I had done countless times before. Yet the view felt different now. What no one had expected when they casually announced, "We're selling your old mansion, Mom," had turned out to be the greatest discovery of my life. I had uncovered not only secrets buried in walls and documents, but something far more profound, a deeper connection to those who came before me, and to those who would come after. The mansion was no longer just the place where my life had unfolded. It was a bridge between generations, a testament to endurance, love, and trust. As I walked through its halls one last time that evening, I realized something important. The mansion would remain more than just a home. It would be a guardian of stories, a keeper of secrets, and a living testament to the lives, struggles, and hopes of generations past. The secret inside, one no one saw coming, had finally been revealed. And in that revelation, I found not just pride in my family's history, but love, understanding, and a deeper bond with my son than I had ever known. The mansion had kept its promise. And now, so would we.